domain-specific metrics which you eventually need to work on and build your algorithms over it.
Yeah. So it was an interesting. I mean, it's a quite classical metric in computer vision. So it was nice to see it in such a modern deep learning approach. So yeah, thanks for that. And then if there are no further questions, then we move to the next talk, which is by Ben-Shaul. I hope I said that correctly.
Yeah, Ben-Shaul, yeah.
And yeah, I mean, we're changing topics right now. So we move to certainty pooling. So yeah, the floor is yours. You have 20 minutes. And I will let you know when you have 5 minutes left.
Thank you. So everyone can see my screen presentation?
Yes.
Okay, so first of all, thank you so much for this opportunity. The speakers are amazing so far, so I'm sure yet to come as well. My name is Ben-Shaul, and today I'll be talking about our paper, Certainty Pooling for Multiple Instance Learning. And our team is Jacob Gildenblatt and myself from Sagivtech and Eldad Kleiman from Roche. We work on AI solutions for digital pathology. And amongst other subjects, we deal with weakly supervised learning. So first, maybe I'll define multiple instance learning and give a visual representation of it. So in multiple instance learning, a bag is composed of several instances, and the goal is to predict the bag level label. A bag has a label 1 if at least one of the instance level labels is 1. The problem is that we don't know the instance level labels. So in this example, I don't know if you can see my marker. Right, so in this example, the bag label is whether king of spade is in the bag. So here we can see that these are positive bags and these are negative bags. And then we call the king of spade the evidence of the bag. So what does this have to do with pathology? So multiple instance learning is a type of weakly supervised learning. So in weakly supervised learning, you have a global label. And then this label can be describing a whole slide image in digital pathology. So an example of this can be whether a patient responded to a treatment or not. So in the case of digital pathology, a bag will be a whole slide image, and the instances will be the tiles from that slide. So the motivation of our algorithm is to solve the following problems. So first, when only a few of the instances are predictive of the label, for example, this can be quite common in pathology where we have huge bags, like very big slides, and only a small percentage of the instances are useful for prediction. The second thing we wanted to focus on is we want the tiles that contributed the most to the prediction to have histological significance, something that is not usually promised in multiple instance learning. And the third is we want our model to be able to deal with uncertainty. So what happens when the model gets tiles it has never seen before, something that's completely different from the training set tile-wise. So this was our motivation, and maybe we'll formalize this a bit before we go on. So multiple instance learning, the whole problem is aggregating instance level information. So we get a bag level prediction. And a bag will be composed of instances x1 till xkm, where km is the size of the bag. And notice the size of the bag can be different for every bag, right? Just like different slides have different sizes. And each bag has a binary label associated with it. And the MIL assumption we're talking right now in the binary case is that for a bag M, the bag label will be 0 if all the instance level labels are 0 and 1 otherwise. In multiple instance learning or MIL, we have an operator to aggregate the instance information to get a bag level prediction. This is typically done with what we call a pooling operator. So let's go over 3 very common pooling operators. So the 2 most basic and well-known ones are max pooling and mean pooling. So in max pooling, we classify every instance and then the pooling takes the largest score amongst all of the instances. In mean pooling, we classify every instance and then we take their mean. So in the recently proposed deep attention-based pooling, wildly successful. So what they did is every instance is assigned a learned weight, and then we take the weighted average of the instances. So one more thing we need in order to define the method is measuring certainty in deep neural networks. So how can we do this? There are several common ways of doing this. One very successful one is Monte Carlo dropout. So Monte Carlo dropout goes like this. So we apply dropout during inference. For the same input, we run forward pass many times. And then we look at the variation of the outputs. So intuitively, if the output changes a lot, it means the network is uncertain about this input. So this was proposed by Yarin Gal, and he showed that they showed that they can use this for multitask learning and lots of interesting stuff. So our intuition in our algorithm is we want to give more weight to the instances that the neural network is certain about. Well, how can we define this uncertainty? We use the Monte Carlo dropout to get multiple predictions from the classifier for every tile. We then look at the STD of those predictions. The weight we use is then the inverse of the STD, and we add an epsilon for smoothing. So if in max pooling, we took the largest prediction amongst all the instances, we modify this max pooling by weighing the predictions by their certainties. And then we take the maximal one. Similarly, we can do this for other pooling methods like mean pooling. So this is the scheme of our model. So bag instances are run through a backbone to get the embeddings. They're then passed through a forward pass to get the predictions, and also through a Monte Carlo dropout to get the STDs. The predictions are then weighted by the certainty, and the maximal instance is chosen. So let's talk about the experiments we showed in the paper. The first thing is a synthetic data set that was actually proposed in attention-based pooling. So the MNIST bag data set is an MAL data set where the bags are composed of MNIST digits. And the bag is considered positive if it contains the digit 9. In MNIST bags, 10% of the positive bag on average will be the evidence, the digit 9. Because we wanted our method to deal with very low evidence ratio, we force exactly one of the instances to be the digit 9 out of the whole bag. So instead of 10%, the evidence ratio is 1%. The difficulty of the problem also depends on the number of training bags in the dataset. We test the different pooling operators in our low evidence ratio dataset in different scenarios for different number of bags. We look at two kinds of performances. The performance of the pooling operator in the bag label, but also its ability to detect the digit 9, so something that's implicitly learned. We can see in the experiment that certainty max pooling outperforms other pooling operators in a wide margin for most points. The test set is always a constant size of 1,000 bags, and this is the top 10 runs out of different seeding for 20 different seeds. Now, as I said, the weights are implicitly learned, but we can look at which got most attention. So we can visualize the attention scores that the different instances got. Here, we compare our algorithm with the different, with the deep attention ML algorithm tested on the same scenario of the low evidence ratio MNIST bag dataset. As you can see, the algorithm is able to distinguish the 9s from the non-9s, even in this low evidence ratio dataset. And this shows why the algorithm performs well in the instance prediction level. The second experiment we show, which is maybe more relevant for this workshop, is the Chameleon 16 dataset. So it's a difficult real world scenario. The Chameleon 16 dataset is breast cancer tumors from H&E slides. And we basically convert this data set to an MIL data set by using only the slide level labels. So does the slide contain tumor or not? And we ignore the pixel level labels available in the data set. So every slide is considered a bag, and we extract thousands of crops from every bag. These are the instances in the MIL. Like before, we want to test the dataset on different scenarios of dataset sizes. So we test the algorithm trained on a varying number of training slides, but we use a fixed test cohort of 130 whole slide images. One more thing before we get to the results. So following one, what we did is instead of learning on the patches directly, we passed them through a pre-trained ResNet 50 on ImageNet, and then learn on the embeddings. And then as a form of an augmentation, instead of taking all the instances in every epoch, we sample 128 from every bag at every epoch. So this is augmentation, and computationally, it's much better, right? Like before, we test the performance of the algorithm in predicting the bag label, but also in the ability to predict the instance level label. So you can see that our method outperforms the other methods, and it is also able to achieve a much higher AUC when using only a smaller fraction of the data set. Like before, we can visualize the top instances from every slide. So if you remember, the motivation is that the top tiles don't necessarily have to have histological significance. And we actually see this in the attention-based pooling where the top tiles can be, you wouldn't expect them to contribute to the prediction. And we see this. So in our method, we are able to achieve these, the top tiles actually contain predictive signatures in them. To summarize, we present an ML approach that is very good in low evidence ratio domains. And we show it in a synthetic, very hard task, and also in a real world problem. Now, one of the drawbacks that we're aware of is that Monte Carlo dropout is computationally expensive. So for every tile, we have to run forward paths many times in order to model this uncertainty. So what we're working on, future work, it includes learning the network certainty and making this more computationally feasible. So I'd love to take questions, and you can reach me offline in this mail as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ido. Yeah, so are there any questions?
If I may,
yes.
I would like to ask you two questions. The first one involves the dropout, because maybe I lost it, but which values did you test for the dropout? And the second question regards the classes distribution in the chameleon, because if the model aggregates regarding using the certainty, maybe if the data set is too unbalanced, it can happen that the model is prone to aggregate to learn a class better than other classes. Thank you. Thank you. Also, thank you for the presentation. It was very interesting.
Thank you. Two great questions actually. The dropout, we tested different values. We in the end we actually saw that using a high dropout of around 0.6 or 0.7 was useful. So you can give an intuitive explanation that the more dropout you use, the more variation some sort you're going to have. This models the uncertainty well. But we tested, this is still open research. I can't tell you exactly what value of dropout will be optimal. And as for the class imbalance, so here we showed the binary setting, but in general, if you have many classes, so the predictive values will be even less prominent because you have a class imbalance. So yeah, these algorithms in general are working on very hard data sets, right? So you have one label for a whole slide. So yeah, this is, I think, an open area of research of how we can overcome this class imbalance. But I think it'll happen in most methods that deal with this weakly supervised setting.
Thank you. I don't know if I can ask another question.
Yes, go ahead.
Did you compare the pooling algorithm with the algorithm that you presented? So the max pooling, the min pooling, and the attention. And if you have any consideration regarding the quantitative results and also the qualitative results, if you compared it.
If we compare, yeah. So I think so these are like. For example, the Chameleon 16, this is the comparison with the attention pooling, the max pooling, and the mean pooling. So for different data set sizes. So is this what you mean?
Yeah, sorry, I lost this, but you have any consideration, any qualitative consideration regarding the comparison?
Yeah, so I don't think I have it in this presentation, but in the paper I can send you offline where we actually assess these. We compare exactly this, definitely.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, are there any other questions?
I have a question. Okay, thank you very much for your presentation. For the Chameleon 16 dataset, for the training, a bag is the set of all patches of the WSI, right?
Yes, maybe I didn't mention this enough. So we use tissue detection. So this way we try to first remove the background patches and maybe patches that are less relevant. And then we also apply a pretty simple stain normalization. But yes, generally the whole bag is used for the training.
Okay, and so what do you mean when you speak about the selection of 128 instances? It is not very clear to me this point.
Right. Great question. Okay, so what we can do, when we train, what we can do is we can take all the tiles and aggregate them. So this can be tens of thousands of tiles per slide. Now, one thing proposed, one second, I'll try to find the reference. Yeah, so it was proposed in this paper that instead of taking all the instances at every epoch, we choose 128, we sample 128 at each epoch. So we also tested with this, by the way, at the beginning, we tried with all the instances and it performed worse. So one explanation is that because it has so many instances, the gradients being passed back aren't too meaningful. When you have 128 or some subsample, it can learn a bit better. It's sort of like an augmentation of some sort.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
I have actually a follow-up question on that. So, I mean, the principle of multiple instance learning is that, okay, you have a label for the whole bag if there is at least one positive example, right? So if you're taking 128 patches or tiles from the whole slide, when there are, I don't know, like 1,000 or several thousands of them, are you also controlling that you're actually keeping at least one of the tiles which is positively labeled, or are you assuming that by sampling 128 several times, you will still overall get enough training signal?
Right, so that's a great question. So actually, when we train, we don't have the instance level labels, right? So we can't actually assert that every sampling of 128 instances will have a positive label, right? But what we try to do in our method in general, so let's say if you have tiles that appear like histological tiles that appear both in positive and negative bags, they will get mixed gradients, right? So one time it'll push it towards the positive direction, and the other time it'll push it towards the negative. And so the uncertainty will be large on these types of instances, and so they'll get less attention. Mm-hmm. So this is our way of combating what you just mentioned.
Okay. Thanks. And did you experiment different number of samples for this kind of because you do this just to augment your data set so that you can use several times the same whole slide image because you are actually getting different instances. Did you experiment? I don't know if you had the time or it was computationally very costly to actually check if 128 was the optimal, or what was your reasoning for choosing this number?
Right. So yeah, we experimented a bit with this, not rigorously enough. I think there could be a separate work just trying to get this particular number. But yeah, we got empirically that this was the best score for. I can say that that it was better than taking all the instances, most definitely. This wasn't comparable even.
Okay, thank you. I think Sebastian might have a question.
Yes, just very small. It's more like a comment in the current work that you are doing. So you are trying to do some more efficient way to sample the probability of certainty of the individual instances, right? So there is this technique that I tried a couple of years ago that it was very cheap, that is called expected gradient length. So you can assume the certainty of the model that the model has given an instance by computing the gradient, the length of the gradient that a given sample will give you, assuming a label. So you don't have to assume a particular instance label. And it's super cheap because you just have to do 2 forward passes. And then you have if it's a binary problem, you have the expectance of the positive label, of the negative. And then you just like the multiplication of the probability of the log of the gradient, and that's it. So it's very cheap. So maybe you can take a look at that. It's expected gradient.
Right. We try to model the uncertainty in several different ways. In the end, we found that the results were most successful with Monte Carlo dropout, but definitely yes. So in general, it's future work we're working on is actually finding a better model for this certainty.
So how long does it take for one batch of 128 to?
I don't have the actual number of. It's per data set and per number of files and things like this, but not too bad. We were training it on many different data sets with this, but still more than the normal train of ML, right?
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Great. Thanks.
Okay, so if there are no further questions, okay, let's thank the speaker once again and move on to the next talk, which is actually so we're repeating actually group again. Now it's the turn of, I think,